gang. Here's to nights that turn into mornings and friends that turn into family. Cheers! Happy birthday to you.
Hello, and welcome to the Friendship IRL podcast. I'm your host, Alex Alexander. My friends, they would tell you I like to ask the hard questions. You know who I am in the group. I'm the person that's saying, okay, I'm going to ask this question, but don't feel like you have to answer it. And now I can be that friend for you too. Today's episode is with my new friend, Wesley Stroupe. Hi, Wesley. I'm sure you are listening into this. Wesley is a Friendship IRL podcast listener, and he took me up on my offer of chatting. I'm always happy to chat. We got messaging back and forth, and I finally was like, do you want to come on the podcast? And he said, yes, which, I got to make my pitch. Come on. And we're all going to be so grateful I did, because this episode is gold. This episode is one where I think so many people are going to feel seen as they are putting themselves out there in ways to make friends and build connections that aren't shiny and flashy. They wouldn't get all the high ratings on TV, but they work and they build connections that feel good. I think there are other people who are going to listen to this episode who maybe have never thought of trying some of these options. And I think some people are just going to listen into this episode because you're curious. We cover something in this episode that I have been dying to find somebody to talk about this with, which is making friends in VR. When you put a headset on and you enter that virtual reality world, what is it like? And you're going to hear, I'm a newbie. I really don't know. And after this episode, adding to my to-do list that I need to go give VR a try because I'm curious and I work in this field and I should know. But I'm really excited, and I promise you this will not be the last episode on VR friendships. At the end of the day, Wesley is doing the thing. He's putting himself out there in a variety of ways to try and build the connections that feel good to him. And for that, I am grateful. I'm grateful that he is here to share his experiences doing the thing. So with that, let's get to today's episode. Hi, Wesley. I am very excited that you're here today.
I am excited to be here with you today, Alex.
I'm going to tell people how we met, which is you sent me some voice memos on my website. So for anybody who's out there who hears me talk about that, people really do that. I really do respond. It leads to some super fun conversations. And Wesley listens to the podcast and sent me a voice memo. We ended up chatting a bit. And finally I was like, wait, why don't you come on the podcast? And now here you are.
It was super fun. It's such a nice way to communicate with people. I might have written an email, but that would have taken a little longer for me to actually fire on that. So I love the voice messages.
Yeah, that's great feedback. And I'm with you. I love a voice memo. I love being able to hear someone's voice and hear the emotion behind it, hear if they're serious or if they pause, or especially some of the voice memos I get from people who listen to the podcast. People come on there and tell me sometimes things aren't good. So the voice memos, I can actually hear that they're not good. And then, I don't know, maybe that makes me more inspired to try and figure out how to help everybody or something. But I love the voice memos, and I'm really grateful to you for reaching out.
I do actually want to say, somebody recently, a newer Bumble BFF friend was like, you should try the voice memo option. I was like, I've never hit this button, and now I'm hitting it on every single app I can think of. That is actually one of those new outshoots for me, I think.
I also think that voice memos maybe remove the opportunity to overthink it. I don't know about you, but when I go to send a text message, I'm reading it 5 times before I hit send. And then by that point, I'm anxious about every word I put in there and the order that it's in. So I feel like the voice memo, it's just kind of I say the thing and then it goes. Makes it faster.
Makes it faster. And I'm usually pretty okay with what I've said.
Yeah, right? My other like voice memo tip for anybody that's out there is sometimes, so this happened to me recently. I had a friend that I'd given her two options, like meeting up on actually that night, meeting up that night or meeting up on Saturday. She's like, oh, well, let's go with Saturday. And I texted her back and I was like, okay, well, great. We'll go with Saturday, right? Like accepting her decision. And then I was thinking about it and I was like, aren't you going to be alone tonight? Like maybe you want to be alone and that's acceptable. But also like maybe tonight is the night you could use me showing up at your door with dinner. And then I felt weird because I felt like I was being pushy. This was all via text message. So this is the moment where I swoop in with the voice memo. This is where I come in, right? Because you feel awkward now. And like text messages remove all your tone of voice and how you feel. That is a great moment for anybody out there to use a voice memo because I was able to be like, hey, now I feel bad. Like I pushed you into what I want. That is not the case. I will accept either decision. I just thought that like maybe you're picking Saturday because you feel like this is last minute for me. It's not. Either way, I am sorry that I feel like I pushed you. It is a great way to like communicate when you feel like text messages have removed all tone of voice and you feel awkward. Yeah.
You just like skip that. It's a skip button on that. And I love that. And I'm trying to find that as much as possible. Anyway, those are fun for me and novel to me. So I'm glad that we talked about it. But I assume
that I want to talk about some other stuff on this podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we are going to talk about some other things. So what we're going to talk about today, the thing I'm most excited about is I really feel like you are testing out some different methods of making new connections and meeting new people and finding friends. When we had talked, you mentioned, you've tried Bumble BFF. You have joined a Unitarian Universalist Church in your community. You are even dabbling in the VR space. And number one, I just want to like clap and give you kudos because you're really putting yourself out there. Like it seems like you have decided you want to make some new connections and you have put yourself out there. Was this like a conscious choice to put energy into this?
Yeah, I've been in a small town, North Carolina, for a couple years now, like, ended up back home after the pandemic and then spread out from there, ended up in a new place. It's tiny. I've been trying to figure out, like, how do you connect with people? Like, I don't have a major metro around me or anything like that. So I'm just like, so I would describe myself as like an incredibly, intensely socially anxious person. And at some point I was getting sick of it. And I just like, all right, we'll see what happens. Screw it. Like, I'll try this, I'll try that, I'll try this, whatever. Something has to change. Something has to, like, I got to be able to have friendship and community in my life again. And that's something that I've been missing, being in a small place.
I mean, number one, good for you for like deciding you wanted to do something about it. Like, I'm not even joking about that. Like, seriously, good for you for being like, I am over feeling this way and I'm going to put myself out there. I am curious, like, so some people come and I don't live in a small town. I live in Seattle, like in the city. I live in a metropolitan city. And I do have people that come in my DMs and whatnot that say like that it's easier in a small town. And you're saying you don't think so.
Okay, so I am a gay dude in a small town, and like that changes the like trajectory of all of it. Like, you don't know. Like, the reason I went out to the Unitarian Universalist Church was just like trans rights, like, what was it, like the summer, a little before that, like started to get really, really bad, especially here in my state. And like, that's not me, but I'm next, you know what I mean? And like, I needed to find the people that were like okay to be myself around and be open or whatever. And I didn't need that in a place like Charlotte or Asheville or whatever, that big place or like artsy place or whatever. I've had to rebuild, and I was like pretty isolated in a way that I don't miss from like being a kid.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say I know or understand being in that situation in a small town. Conceptually, I do. Saying that, I'm like, oh, okay, this makes a lot of sense. You're just trying to find safe spaces. And believe me, I wish everywhere was safe. But currently, I mean, especially with all the legislature, yeah, this makes so much sense that a small town does not feel the same to you as it might to someone else.
And I'll say, being able to find a place and like branch out, like I've been reaching out to try to be less frightened of my neighbors, because I don't think I actually need to be frightened of all my neighbors, but that you get that pervasive, it's there, like you don't know until you try, and like, I don't know, does something happen to you?
Yeah. That makes total sense. And when you've had enough bad experiences, potentially, I don't know, and you don't have to tell us, but like when you've had some bad experiences, you're like, you know, you have evidence in your brain of how this isn't going to work out before you even go out there.
Yeah. I guess what I want to say there is it's weird getting away from that and like having that like fade away for a couple of years, because you're somewhere where like I was in Asheville for a couple of years, and like there, I didn't think about it. You know, I had my life. I had my job, my apartment, my friends. I went out, didn't come up, didn't think about it, didn't have to worry about anything. And then coming back and like, oh, what's the world really like now? Is it like I remembered? And reality is different than what gets built in your brain sometimes.
Reality is different than what you built in your brain sometimes. I couldn't have said it better myself. I've tried to talk about this exact concept so many times on this podcast, and Wesley just hits it with one sentence. Now, I will say that is not to shy away from what Wesley just shared with us, which is that he lives in an area of this country where the systems, we talk about the systems on here, are literally being built to make him feel like he does not belong in certain spaces. And yet, he is still going out and trying to carve out a space that feels safe to him. He is questioning all the thoughts he has built up in his brain. And I cannot say enough in this episode how grateful I am to Wes for coming on here and sharing his experiences, because it takes a lot to feel like you are a socially anxious person and put yourself out there and not know if you're going to feel safe and if you belong, and to just keep going and keep trying because you decide community and friendship is worth it. So that's all. I'm just so freaking grateful for this episode. So when you joined the Unitarian Universalist Church, what was that like for you? Like, was it a good space? Have you met people? I guess maybe how long have you been going? Tell us like some of the basics of choosing to go there for the first time.
Okay. So when I got here into the town I'm in, I looked at the congregation. I looked at their website to see what was going on. I think they were still closed from COVID or whatever. And then I was just like, you know, I always thought that would be a good idea to go. Like, I love a potluck. I can't go anywhere else to find a potluck. So I thought about it. Like, I grew up pastor's kid's kid. So like, I don't know, I was attached to a lot of that, like organizationally, communally, like not, I was a weird nerd about it too, but the actual like mechanics of having a local community and like ritual and things like that.
Yep.
That was really important to me. And intergenerational things are so cool. I miss the ability to do something like when I was a kid, I would do like handbells with my grandmother. There'd be older folks there. There'd be people like you could know families. You could know people that could be your grandpa. A full sense of community.
I'm already so excited about this episode. This is such a great call out, because I don't know if you've seen my wheel of connection. I have this whole wheel of connection with all the different people in your life. And one of them is formal community. And it's that idea of like, you go somewhere and you feel like I belong here. And a huge piece of it is just like being comfortable in the organization of it, the rituals of it, the structure of it, which is exactly what you're talking about, right? Like the potlucks, the open invite events, the show up for this thing, the like, there's familiarity there. And on a basic level, especially when you move somewhere new, it's nice to feel like there are places, not even people, but like places and groups that you feel like you belong in. It's like a super like deep primal need.
Yeah. It's one of those, you know what it feels like, and then you trade it, and then time pass, whatever. It's a big deal to me for that reason, honestly. Like, they're familiar faces. There are people who I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that happened to your mother or something like that.
It's like a reminder in some senses, like when you're talking about like the energy and generational friendship, it's a reminder to me at least that there's more out there than just my own world.
Yeah.
Like other people are also having experiences that are different than mine, but like just as important. And I can grieve with them, support them, learn from them, laugh with them. Like you get to feel this full range of emotion and remember that like the world is bigger than you.
Yeah.
Just by simply going to this place regularly and engaging with the people there.
Yeah. And I guess there's like new ways of connecting. On a lot of Sundays, I run the Zoom.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, it's just like it's not like I'm watching, making sure people come in. We run the media through it and all that. So it's like social plus awkward soundboard guide, you know, in the back. It's that culmination of things. And it's really nice. We've got folks that are like, you know, stuck in their homes, like older folks.
Yep.
Post-COVID and never were able to really get back out into things or assisted living, whatever.
I mean, that makes total sense, right? Feeling like you belong there is giving to you. So now you're contributing, you have a role, you do something. Every role is important. That's what makes the group run. And your role just so happens to be managing the Zoom. And like, that's necessary, just like you're saying, to connect people who aren't able to get into the service. They all add up. All the roles add up. It all wouldn't work if people didn't sign up for those roles.
Yeah.
Also, I think it makes you feel more connected to the group if you actually are involved and like have something you do for it.
Yeah.
It's one of my biggest suggestions to people to feel more connected to, especially like a formal organization, is to take on some like role or responsibility. Not to mention, it probably means you get to interact with a variety of people because people might have questions.
Yeah. I guess the whole shtick of the place is that there's the service, there's like singing and stuff, and somebody gives a talk. Some people will call it a sermon, some people will call it a talk. Sometimes there's like a guided meditation or just like, and then there's coffee hour. You get out and there's coffee hour in the front. And everybody's kind of like eating snacks. And like, there are a lot of people asking me to fix their computers. That is a very common experience. And like, I just got off a committee. I feel so free. Google Docs is horrible. And, but during that time, like the Zoom folks, that's when we unmute them and I stick around for a little bit. And then eventually I need food. And I go congregate towards the food and talk to somebody about D&D or something.
I love it. Have you made any, I mean, I know you're getting that sense of like belonging and feeling like you, whatever. Have you made any closer friends? And I say that loosely, like acquaintances. It's not like you have to have met your new closest friend there. But like, do you feel like you actually have met some people and like found some other similar interests? Like you're saying D&D.
Yeah. I mean, I think young people showing up is a thing that is just like baffling to anybody in a spiritual place right now or whatever it is, but it's happening a little bit there. But I'm also building relationships with people that are like, would be my friends in like other circumstances. That is happening a little bit, but I've certainly met people that like I think of would probably like, I don't know, I don't do phone calls a lot, but like people I would connect with and keep up with and ask about.
Yeah, maybe find some shared interests or check in. Yeah.
There's a mix of the familial and the friendly and the casual and the, oh, I'm glad that this person is in my community and I know them. There's the whole gamut there.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I'm a member of a Toastmasters group where there are people younger than me, older than me, men, women, different professions. I mean, one of my closest friends in the group, Ed, is, I hate to guess Ed's age, but like somewhere in the 80s for sure. super sweet old man, right? And he's so kind, and we like chatted up, and it's like that ability to just kind of show up and check in and learn a little bit about somebody's life is so comforting week after week.
Yeah.
So I love, again, that you put yourself out there in the church and you found this community. And it sounds like you had some sense of belonging to something like that, analogous to that before. And like you knew where to seek that out. I want to note that I think I kept mixing up the name of that church. We are talking about a Unitarian Universalist Church. And I think I kept switching those around. But if you're curious, that's what you can Google. Now, we also just talked all about this church and all about community. And you heard me talk about something called formal community and my Wheel of Connection framework. You can find my Wheel of Connection framework at alexalex.link/wheel. It's also linked in the show notes. But the briefest of overviews is I developed this wheel because I got really tired of hearing people just talk about friendships separate from the other relationships in our life. They're all connected. We can't keep separating family and community and friendships and past friendships. Like they're all connected, right? Because we are born into our family of origin or live with our family of origin. And those caregivers take us out into our first formal communities, the schools and places of worship and clubs and sports leagues, networking groups, the neighborhoods that we live in. Like they pick the people we are around, which is how we meet our acquaintances and then make our friends. And as an adult, you have a lot of impact over the formal communities you choose to join. But I would argue that there is some lingering sense from your childhood quite often, right? Wesley's saying here that he thought about the church because it was something familiar to him. And a lot of us might seek that out. We might completely switch, but then finding new formal communities feels incredibly overwhelming and foreign and new because they are so different than what we previously experienced. But a formal community is just a place you go or a group you participate in where people are coming together around a common goal or interest. Most formal communities have some sort of structure, maybe a leadership team or scheduled meetings or rules or regulations. And formal communities, because they are centered around a common interest and they have some sort of structure, are a great way to meet new people and find shared meaning. Now, we've all showed up to these groups and it feels super awkward because it feels like everybody else knows what's going on and we don't. Everybody kind of knows each other. They know how to act. They know where to grab the forks for the potluck, things like that. I believe that we develop a belief over time. You go and you participate in these groups, and at first it feels really awkward, but after a while you start to believe I belong here, and that is really powerful. Let's talk a little bit about the Bumble BFF experience.
Okay.
Are you still on Bumble BFF? What has that been like for you?
I feel like my experience with Bumble BFF has seasons almost. Like it's a couple times a move, a couple times a year that I actually focus on it, like in work, in school, in whatever, without thinking about it. I easily would become friends with like women. Like that was easy, natural, didn't worry about it, didn't think anything. And so like Bumble BFF, I think men need more friendships in general. I think men need more friendships with men, and men need more friendships with people of various genders and ages and backgrounds. But like friendship with men, like I'm a gay man. It's scary. You're like, are they going to get mad at me? Are they going to reject me? Are they going to harm me physically? And it's like, those things aren't actually all that common in my experience, my actual experience. But like, you get told these things, you see these things. And so I knew it was important to make the connections that I was afraid of because I didn't have even like, it didn't happen casually. It didn't happen being, I don't know, do people like sports things? I don't like, I don't know how they do it normally, but I didn't have access to that.
If you are listening to Wes's, very open, very honest share here about male friendships, and you're like, what is he talking about? Go listen to episode 31 and 32. I really dove in to men's friendships in those 2 episodes from more of a overview research perspective. And now we have Wes here echoing some of the things I talked about in that episode. But if you're curious, go check it out. It could be D&D games.
Yeah. But Bumble BFF, I give that people a little bit and like start up some interesting conversations, see where it went, and find all the quasi introverts.
Yeah, you know what you're looking for. You're being specific. There's nothing wrong with that.
And it's like this experience of like, one, I have somebody that I would consider like one of my closest friends in the friggin' world who I met on Bumble BFF a couple years ago. I think that you were picking up on this when we were talking earlier. I made a friend. We became friends. He got into med school and he's almost out. And I've been able to watch that, and it's super cool. And it's been good to keep up and go see shows and stuff like that. And I have never been on the swipey apps or whatever as like in a romantic context. That just hasn't happened. So I'm coming at it just like, oh, well, this is a thing I can do. It's got an interesting energy to it, and it's been good to meet people. But you also have this experience of like, you make a friend and then you find like the node tendrils out into like a group of people that are great to be around. Like, if you're in a new place, you can kind of, I don't know, stumble onto that.
You're saying if you like meet somebody on Bumble BFF, they might like invite you to a group thing, or like it might be a way to meet other people.
That's like a clinical way to put it, I guess. Like, my experience is I made a friend. I got introduced to roommates. Then there was like going to a New Year's thing or something like that. And now I've got a group of people that are now spread up and down the East Coast over COVID and whatever. It's organic, but it happens, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what you're talking about is similar actually to the church. And let me explain. Okay.
Yeah.
So I saw somebody the other day who was talking about Bumble BFF. And they were saying that like the thing about Bumble BFF is it was created to try and skip straight to that, like, we're friends. People don't want to do the work. And I'm not talking about you because you're doing the work of putting themselves out there in community around strangers to meet acquaintances. Like, every single person we've ever met was once just a random face in a room that had no connection to us. And then we started talking to them. We got to know a little bit about them over time. Maybe they became a member of our community. Eventually, maybe they became our friend. Like, it was a process. We didn't just walk into a room one day and that person was our friend. As much as we like to think that was the case about like childhood friendships, that was not it. So what this person was saying was like, Bumble BFF is trying to skip to that, just like, we're friends. And although it sounds like you made at least one, if not more, great friends on Bumble BFF, what you're saying is it's actually like a way to draw you out and meet other people similar to putting yourself in the Unitarian Universalist Church setting. Like, both ways, you're putting yourself out there with other people you've never met before to have conversations and figure out if anybody, at least like an interesting person to hang out with or talk to.
Yeah. I think the description that you got, I will say, I think based on what I've read about and what I've experienced, because it's a gender separated app for whatever reason it is. And my experience has been like very much not that. It does take work. I don't know, as a guy, I think it does take work to even try that. So the people there are wanting to connect. It's not like, I think you can try to skip those things, but I think if you engage with it as earnestly as possible, you can engage earnestly with almost any platform and it'll do something like that. Engage with any community. If you're just like, if you put yourself there and you're like, I'm doing this for real, most of it'll work if there are other people.
Okay, don't get me wrong. Like, I think you're totally right. I think this is a great clarification. You can never skip straight to that friend part. But if you think about it, Bumble BFF is kind of this thing where, like, it's as if you set yourself up for a bunch of individual coffee dates where you just talk to one person. And for some reason, that feels a little easier, but it also puts a lot more pressure on that one. Like, will it work or will it not work? Versus if you go to the church, if you take your Bumble BFF friend and show up at their house party, their D&D game, their concert, their whatever, you're in a room with a bunch of people where you have more options. There's not that much pressure and you can move around. And a lot of people, you're right, no matter what, you have to go through that phase. It's just which way are you going to do it? Kind of that like one-on-one. Is this going to work or is it not? Or the one-to-many, like put yourself in community.
Yeah. I think the angle on it for me is that I used to be like, in group settings, I'm not great at talking. I never know when to like interject or not to interject. And I mostly just kind of like 3 minutes later is like, can we still talk about the Barbie movie? I had some thoughts. I'm finding this with a lot of platforms is that there's like this group of people that need it to get going. Like that has been my experience with the Bumble BFF. That has been my experience with Threads, Instagram/Threads.
Yeah, talk about it.
I don't know. I liked weird Twitter and following like various like designers or people trying to hawk their books. I don't know. I liked all of that. Like, but it was a parasocial thing, totally. Most of the time, my experience with Twitter was not connecting with people. It was like watching cool people do cool things that are in the combined metropolitan area of New York City and San Francisco, which are the same physical place. You know, does that description make sense? Okay. Threads feels different. I got on it like the day after it came out, and like there was no way to find people like by search or algorithm. So if you ended up following people with interesting Instagram followings, like you found people in the replies and started branching out. And like there was this like people were looking to do it because there were no affordances for it. And so fun. Found cool people, went and got Bricks pizza with somebody that was like, oh, I'm in the area.
Yeah, and you did. You're saying it's a parasocial thing. You made it go offline. Look at you.
Right, but what I'm saying is that like the big thing is X or Twitter or whatever versus Threads is like there was an opportunity for that kind of explosion. I don't know, of connection.
I get it. I was on Threads right after it launched. It was the wild, wild west, but it was fascinating to watch. And I still get on Threads. I'm not very active posting on it. I'm trying to figure out what the heck I even have to say on there. But I love the conversations, and it really does, for some reason, in comparison to other social platforms, I don't know, like because it's text only, because it's about the thread, something about it really does. I feel like when I'm talking on there, there's an actual human on the other side more than other platforms, if that makes sense. Like you could comment on somebody's with a huge following and they will like actually respond, or other people who have the same interest will actually join in on the thread. That's been my experience. I really like Threads. I'm with you.
Like I can talk about social issues and religion and politics or whatever with strangers and like talk about it and like try to hear and listen to people and have an honest human exchange. And it's fascinating. Either it hit the right people. Like I saw somebody talk about how it was like, it's all the people who are on Instagram but don't post photos, have like 50 of them or whatever for like from 2014 to 2023. And like, it's just, that's where people have stories and ways to message them. I don't know, like the hangers on, like, oh, you actually want to hear what we have to say? Great. We'll talk your ear off.
Okay. Speaking of the online space, let's talk about VR.
Okay. All right.
I am so interested in hearing about your experience of VR to make connections.
VR is, I've had a headset of some kind or another since 2017. I tried the big one that I do actually make friends on and meet new people and interact is actually VRChat. Meta has its own one. I think this is the counterpoint to what you're saying about Threads, is that the person element isn't coming from like, oh, a connection to a name.
Mm-hmm.
It is the embodied presence part. So you can have that, like, I am a different person here, but I am here with you, looking at you in the anime eyes, you know? And so I am a night owl. So I think I've basically just made a bunch of Midwesterner friends.
So explain to me and anybody else who's listening who doesn't know, like, how does it work? Like, are there different spaces you go into in there? Are there like ways you meet up with people? Do you just like show up the first time and whoever you walk by, you strike up a conversation?
Okay. I said it was kind of new, but it has been a little bit since we were talking, I guess.
Yeah.
It's second nature to me at this point. It's weird. There are rooms and, well, they're worlds that you can go to.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was saying I got into VR in like 2017, tried to get into something like VRChat. So I tried that. I tried one of the Microsoft ones that they did that had like organized, like, oh, meditation session, oh, LGBT meetup, whatever, with a time and a schedule. Those worked at the time, kind of. They were felt pretty shallow. But I was afraid of VRChat because it's weird. People are anime characters. People are furries. People are anime girls. There's an avatar I have saved that's a Roomba with a Kmart logo on it, and it plays like Kmart not commercial, like the things that would be over the loudspeakers if you were in there, and like the canned music. Anyway, you can be all sorts of things.
Could be anything you want to be.
Right. And a lot of people still want to look mostly like a humanoid figure. So it took me forever to try to get in there because it was intimidating. It was big. It was weird. People are loud. There are children sometimes playing it like it's a game, I guess. Like just that, and not having that realization. Also, it's against TOS, whatever. So the public stuff can be off-putting. I left. A couple years later, I finally figured out an IRL friend I could go meet up with there that I hadn't seen in a while. We met up. I met his crew of people that he had been building relationships with over the past couple of years, and then like started to branch off from there. And it's like, it's a different world where people are there. They are there. It is a place that you go to. It feels like getting ready to either go to the bar or go to an open mic night or go hang out at the mall, getting the headset on. And if you are going to a bar, getting your little fruity beverage together and setting that where you'll get the straw in without spilling it all over yourself, setting up your chair, setting up your whatever. It's as real of a thing. I think it's just a bizarro version of the world, but there are people there. So it has that depth.
So interesting. Yeah. And I mean, we talked about in the beginning of the episode, you live in a small town. So this like really, really broadens the people you connect with. It shifts time zones, or like it flattens time zones a little bit. Like if you want to get on in the middle of the night at 3 a.m., bars are closed, third spaces are closed, but they're open there, and you might be able to meet up with people where it's a completely different time where they are, but it doesn't matter because you're all in the same space doing the same thing and it's open and you're there.
Yeah. I would say like you mentioned small town. So the feeling of it as a place and size is, I think, interesting to me. It feels like a small to mid, like a large town or a small to mid-sized city with just like a bunch of different groups of people. But it does feel small right now, I guess.
Do you see a lot of the same people? They might be in different avatars, but like the same people every time you go?
Generally, I do. I've got a group of people I hang out with, and I think people do generally settle into that. Like going out in public versus going to, it's not like house party every night. It's like something closer to a little more informal than a dinner party or something, but like in a space that people feel like there's a container and you're with people that you're either going to get to know or that you know, and that you can feel that safety or whatever.
So that's what I was going to ask is like when you go and you hang out with your friends that are there, it's mostly just like you're saying a dinner party. It's like you hang around and talk, or they're like activities you do. Sometimes, I guess maybe it depends.
On the weekends, I do this mostly on like Friday nights or Saturday nights. Like how it kind of goes is meeting up in a public place, and then like there's trivia, there's card games, there's pool. There is lots of pool being played, like billiards in there. There are drinking games. Like sober spaces in VR would be awesome. I think that is a real world project that needs to make the jump. Not, you don't have to, and nobody can tell, but there's that element.
Well, you might be able to tell. Yeah, if you're sober and everybody else is intoxicated, if that's what you're looking for, is like other sober conversation. I get what you're saying, even though you're in VR.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's impacting the interaction just like it would in real life.
Yeah. And there are people that can't go to those spaces too. Mm-hmm. And so I need to work on social change in VR. That's okay. It's so funny.
Hell yes, Wesley. Go make some social change in VR and then come back and hang out and tell us all about it. I'm here for it. I'm just dropping in to tell you that I am abso-freaking-lutely delighted that we are on here talking about connections in virtual reality and what that actually looks like. And I don't have a lot at the moment to add other than to tell you how happy I am. And if you are listening to this, to tell you, like, if you are making connections in VR, you are welcome here. If this episode hasn't already told you that. And I want to hear about it because at the end of the day, I really firmly do believe that there's no right or wrong way, because there are some real out there ways I can think of that are not okay. But for the most part, all that matters is that you find connections that feel good to you. And maybe that's it. Those far off connections I'm thinking of really don't feel good. That's all that matters, is that you're building connections that feel good to you. And as the world changes and new technologies appear, having spaces like this where we share what those experiences are like, so that, I mean, you can hear me fumbling through a little bit the questions here. I don't even know what to ask because I've never experienced it. And maybe that means I should, because this is the kind of stuff I talk about. So I'll add that to my to-do list. But sharing this kind of stuff and making it not feel othered is going to give us more awareness of how this is working for people. That's all. I'm really grateful to be having this conversation and to be sharing it with you all. Let's get back to it.
I don't know what I was getting at, but there are activities, there are games. There's an open mic that I know happens every Sunday that I check in on a friend of mine, and it's jokes and singing, and it's on a Sunday afternoon. So I'm tired from church before I go to open mic night.
Go to the open mic.
I'm kind of an outsider looking in on that, which is interesting. I'm kind of like, oh, this looks like another very similar type of third space where people are meeting up in the same place over time. And I am seeing familiar faces. Like, I think that's the thing that is hard to get in real life sometimes right now, no matter where you are, if it's too big for you to get familiar faces or too small. Mm-hmm. But that's my through line on church, on Threads, on VRChat, on Bumble BFF, like the familiar faces thing is, I think, the thing that we could really build into our technology better than we have previously.
Yeah, I mean, the familiar faces piece is huge, right? Because it's the repetition that allows us to like slowly over time start to get to know someone, build up some like memories and connection points and shared experiences. That is where we get to that point where like at some point we consider someone our friend. And so you're very right. That is a struggle a lot of people are having, is like that repetition piece, but not necessarily you. You are like very actively putting yourself in spaces where you can tap into that repetition and start to build up the familiarity, whether it's in the church, in Threads, by having conversations in Bumble BFF, by hanging out with your friends on VR. Like, would it be great if this was more natural? Yes. In my lifetime, do I hope we change that? Yes. But currently, it takes a lot of effort and energy to build that for yourself.
And like technology just in real life, it's currently like, yes, companies could take more care. But also I think I'm a person who hits the books on social issues in real life, and it's the same thing everywhere. People are the same everywhere. And that's great. I want to be clear. People are the same everywhere. And that's awesome.
I mean, I think that we've touched on a lot of things. I think that honestly, this is going to have a lot of people like thinking, because I've said you are putting yourself out there in a variety of ways. Like most people come to me and they've done one of these. You're doing 3 of these, 3 different ways to put yourself out there and build the connections you want. If you had any final words for somebody, I mean, you self-proclaimed yourself as somebody with very intense social anxiety. If there's anybody who's listening who feels that way, do you have any like final words to those people on putting themselves out there and like making some new connections?
It's scary and it feels like it will kill you, and it will not kill you. And you just have to keep saying that to yourself repeatedly and go, not die. You'll be fine.
That is truly the most perfect way to end this episode. Because like, let's get to the heart of it. You will feel like it's going to kill you, and it will not. You will be fine. Wesley, thanks so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
This was so fun. I appreciate you having me on.
Wesley, if you are listening to this, I want to say the biggest thank you for coming on the Friendship IRL podcast. I'm without words. We have so many amazing episodes on this podcast. And I've mentioned before, I have this super long list of all these things I want to cover on here. And this episode that you just listened to feels like one of them, because it's not an episode about big friend groups or trips or friendships that have spanned decades or all the quote unquote right ways to have friendships, the one that look pretty for TV and media and books, social media. None of this necessarily looks aesthetically pleasing, but it works. The same way that friend dates to read would work, or taking a rant, like auditing a college class together would work. That doesn't look pretty for everybody else, but it is impactful. And this is an episode like that. So I'm just really grateful to get to do this work, to get to have this conversation with Wesley, to be smiling as big as I am right now. If you are somebody who is listening to this podcast and Wesley's experience sounds more aligned with yours, and you have always felt like, I don't know, you're different, I just want to remind you there's not. You're not. And I'm so happy you're here, and I'm happy you're listening to the podcast. And I hope that we all take his perfect words that he closed with to heart. And we remember that it's scary and it feels like it's going to kill you, and it will not kill you. And you just have to keep saying that to yourself repeatedly. With that, I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Friendship IRL. I am so honored to have these conversations with you, but don't let the chat die here. send me a voice message. I created a special website just to chat with you. You can find it at alex.chat. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle at it's Alex Alexander, or go ahead and leave a review wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. Now, if you want to take this conversation a step further, send this episode to a friend. Tell them you found it interesting, and use what we just talked about as a conversation starter the next time you and your friend hang out. No need for a teary goodbye. I'll be back with a new episode next week.